Welcome. In front of me is a POCO X3 NFC, and today I'll go over unboxing along with an overview of the device. So starting off, this is the packaging that it comes, obviously. So let's pop it open. Now I'll mention that I already set up the device, so this is kind of like a repeat of an unboxing. Let's pop it open, drop it to the side, nothing up in that top part. Then we got paperwork and nice inclusion of a case. Always like when companies do that. We don't really care about paperwork, so I'm just gonna drop that to the side. There's also a SIM ejector, but let's be honest, everybody's seen those. Let's take out the casing right here. So that's basically how it looks like. It's just a nice silicone case. Now I'm gonna set it to the side and come back to it shortly. Then we get the phone itself. So I'm gonna open it up. There we go, and just drop it to the side for now and finish up with what's in the box, and not much. So we got just the cable for charging and the power brick. So this is a fairly nice power brick. It's a 33 watt one. I've already checked it, so yeah. Just drop that back in the box and then get the phone. So there we go. So starting off, probably the main part of the phone would be the display. So that's a 6.67 inch display with a resolution of 1080p by 2400. So while I'm going to be mentioning the specs of this device, I will at the end also mention the previous version of this phone, which is the POCO F2 Pro, because the device was a little bit more expensive but also a little bit better in certain cases. So I'll kind of at the end basically tell you the differences and also give you an idea which one might be better for you. Okay, so pixels per inch, 395 with an 84.6% screen to battery ratio. It's a fairly nice display, honestly, and the only obstruction here is just the hole punch camera, which is just the difference between the previous one, which had a motorized one. Honestly, I think I prefer the motorized one. It just makes the display look cleaner, and honestly I don't really use selfie cam, so it just kind of seems useless to me to have that obstruction there anyway. And then the glass of it is a Gorilla Glass 5, so just a typical protection here. With an rating, the display brightness rating HDR10. That's because it's an LCD IPS, so honestly don't expect anything mind-blowing here. It apparently goes up to 450 nits, but honestly right now it's maxed out and it isn't bright enough in my opinion. It's kind of lacking in the brightness department in my personal opinion, but then I'm kind of used to OLED displays or Super AMOLEDs. I'm gonna quickly change the timeout for the screen, so let me quickly find that. Screen mode, text, dark mode, refresh rate. I'm not really sure where that is in this case. It's apparently not here. Sleep maybe? There we go. It's 50 seconds. Let's change it to something a little bit better. Okay. So, moving on. We have several cameras, and at the front we got just a simple 20 megapixel wide sensor that shoots at 1080p 30 frames. Now the sensor itself is kind of okay. The AI or whatever they're doing is a little bit too much. Now I'm not going to be bothering with kind of running it right now, although I guess I can. I took a couple photos before, so you can, there it is, so you can get a look at it. And my completely messy hair. So right now it looks okay on here, but let me just kind of bring up the photo. So right here, the skin looks okay, even though it's a little bit smoothed. It still keeps the details somehow, but then like, what is this? It just looks like someone took a finger and smudged the screen. It just got awful. So yeah, now let's actually not go here. Let me quickly open up the gallery so you can, if I can actually find it, there we go, gallery. So apart from the this photo, I also took another one, same selfie cam. This one came out a little bit better, but still it does use some smoothing in here, so it is a little bit, in my opinion, excessive, especially like in the first photo that I showed. It was just atrocious. Then apart from the selfie cam, we have 4 different cameras at the back. So let me flip it over, move the light maybe so it's a little bit better visible. So you can see there is 4 cameras and a flash, and this kind of like a weird design here. And the main sensor is a 64 megapixel wide sensor. Then we got a 13 megapixel ultra wide, 2 megapixel macro, and also 2 megapixel depth sensor. Now personally, the macro and depth are useless. They're just to rack up the count of cameras, so it kind of stacks up better with the current flagships and other devices. So basically, look at us, we got just as many cameras as Samsung or whoever else, and it literally means nothing because those cameras are basically useless. If you want to take macro photos, I basically advise you to use just a 64 megapixel normal sensor, and I'll just quickly give you a comparison of the differences in the photos, which they are fairly minimal. For a macro lens, this thing is just kind of useless, and they could have not included it at all and dropped the cost even lower. But then they included the 2 megapixel probably because it's already super cheap to add it into the device. So let's just open up the gallery again, and so let me quickly look at the photos. So okay, this is the 64 megapixel along with this one, and this is the macro shots. Now I did a couple different tries of macro because I just couldn't get it good enough in my opinion. As you can see, for instance, here the light just messes it up. Here just didn't really come out super sharp, and this one I think was the best out of all the ones that I captured. So we can actually zoom in on it, and well, this is the max I can zoom in, and you can see the grooves and just a table that, well, has barely visible grooves. This is something that you can see actually in the macro and not really yourself. But yeah, you can see it is okay, honestly. For a 2 megapixel sensor, it did a okay job. I was expecting actually less, but then when we compare it to this one, which that is how the table looks like from a little bit further away because it's a 64 megapixel, so I couldn't get so close to it. But we can zoom it in a little bit closer, and you can see right here, that's basically where it kind of, well, 64 megapixel starts looking better. I believe this is not really in focus. Kind of captured focus a little bit wrong, but you can clearly see, we can zoom in closer, and the detail is still somewhat here. The previous one did, in my opinion, had less of it. Just the difference was the other one wasn't able to zoom in as close as this one. So this one comes better. And just as a comparison, I'm gonna drop my phone in here, which is the Mate 20 Pro, a little bit outdated device honestly, but it still does okay with macro shots. Let me quickly find the photo, which, let's see. So we got, for instance, this is just a macro shot. Now I did need to, let me brighten it up. I did need to put some flashlight because my phone has the sensors a little bit closer to the middle, so I basically block it with the phone at great shadow. But this is zoomed out at the moment, and just to compare to the macro that this phone apparently has, so this is a macro too. Okay, so just the color difference, that's because of the lighting, but the detail, so you can zoom in right here, and this is right now max zoom. So let's compare it to an actual macro lens. That is significantly better, I would assume. If we kind of try to get it the same size, it's kind of like, I would say, right here. So you can see this is just so much more detailed, and the fact that I can actually zoom closer to this point and basically see the groove on the entire screen, something that is barely visible in actuality, is just how macro lens is supposed to work. This is not. So kind of getting off this topic, just saying the macro and depth lenses here are just kind of useless, and you could do without them, and this would change nothing. So just a trend that companies have right now, just to drop more lenses because it just looks better on paper and in advertising, that hey, look at us, we have 4 lenses, even though 2 of them are complete and utter garbage. But other than that, the 64 megapixel lens does an okay job with photos. It captures them well and detailed. It is a 64 megapixel sensor, so it's kind of hard to screw that one up. And other than that, with those lenses you can capture footage at 4K 30 frames, 1080p 30 and 60, plus at 1080p you have also slow motion with 120 frames. And then you have 720p only slow motion of 960, and there is also one more which I can't remember right now, so let me quickly flip it over, and I believe it's somewhere here. Slow motion, there we go. So you go up here and you can see 120 at 1080p, and then at 720 we have basically all of them, so 240 and 960 as well. And now it looks like none of them are really continuous, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, so this is not continuous. It's capturing, as you can see, there's this kind of thing going around. Once it reaches the end, that's basically the end of the recording. So it is not continuous, although it's kind of nice that it is at least 120, and I believe the 240 was okay in terms of like the length of it. I think it was like 10 seconds or longer, so that is fine. But I don't know why each one of them drop. Like many other manufacturers make the 720, for instance, with 960 frames, and they make it basically a second long slow motion recording. Now, in fairness, the 1 second stretches out to like 10 seconds or 15, but still, in actual recording, you have 1 second to capture that moment that you want to capture in slow motion. That is kind of difficult, I would say. It has some kind of ways sometimes to capture it when it detects motion, but that, in my personal experience, it rarely works. So it always starts capturing after the moment is already gone, and makes this kind of useless. So yeah. Now, moving out of the camera department, we can now start talking about the specifications of the device itself. So it packs a Snapdragon 732G, which is, I believe, the highest at the moment, at least at this generation, with the kind of lower tier one. The other ones that you right now have that are the higher one is, I believe, Snapdragon 865 Plus, but that is basically a flagship chip. So the device with this one would probably cost 3 times more. And the device itself has 2 variants in terms of storage. So we have the 64 gigabyte and 128 gigabytes, and both of them have 6 gigabytes of RAM. So honestly, if you're buying this, I'd probably go for the smaller one, the 64, and just buy a hefty SD card, which you can always remove and change it into another device, as long as you don't have a Huawei device which uses nano memory. And that probably would be a better course of action than just trying to go for the 128 gigabyte right here. Assuming the price difference, maybe the price difference isn't that big. I haven't actually checked it. If it's only like, I don't know, $20 more, so probably 120 would be a better course in this case. And like I said, you can expand it via storage. So if you go with either one of them and you don't have enough, you can always expand it further. And both of those, well, the storage itself on the phone uses UFS 2.1, so that is basically the transfer speeds, and it is well, a bit slower than, for instance, something that you could see in a computer with an SSD. The newer device or the older one, I believe, the POCO F3 or F2, I mean, Pro used the 3.1, which that basically approaches speeds of a SSD, and that is just something way better than what we got here. Now, also the device comes with NFC, obviously. I mean, it's called literally NFC. Has a 5160 milliamp hour battery, which is a fairly hefty unit right here. And like I said before, we have the 33-watt charger. And just to put that in perspective in terms of charging speeds, they advertise that you can charge it to 62% in 30 minutes, and in basically a little bit over an hour, 65 minutes, you can charge it basically fully. And honestly, I really like the fact that for this price tag, which is about $220, they did add a really good charger along with, well, fairly decent charging speeds right here. Other companies, for instance, primarily pointing finger at Samsung, keeps dropping a 25-watt charger into their top spec flagship devices and expect, for instance, people to pay, well, $2,000 for something like a Galaxy Fold 2, which to me, it's kind of missing something in my opinion. You're paying for a premium experience, and you're suffering at the very beginning with just a crap charger right there. So yeah. And lastly, the device rocks an Android 10, kind of obvious, almost every device now does, and has the skin over it of MIUI 12. Now, honestly, in previous, I was not very fond of the MIUI. It kind of looked cluttered and a little bit childish to me, but with this one, it actually looks really clean. So this is basically the notification center. It looks okay, clean. Something that I actually found out and is really amazing here. For instance, when you go into your app tray right here, you actually have categories, so you can switch between them. You can disable this if you don't like it, but personally, I adore this idea right here. The tabs of categories, and it basically drops apps into those specific categories. Now, obviously, once you start installing them, not every one of them will be categorized correctly, but just the inclusion of this and the ability that you can sort them yourself later on is amazing. I don't really like having all of it right here in this entire wall of different apps that I just kind of have to look for, and when you install one, it just kind of switches it around a bit, moves them, and the app that you were used to seeing in specific position now is in different. I don't like it. Maybe I'm the only one, maybe not, but that's just my personal taste right here, and I really like this. And apart from that, the device is fairly minimal in terms of bloatware, at least from what I can see right here. You still do have some of it, so yeah, keep that in mind. And let's go into the settings. So you can see that's kind of how the settings looks like. There we go. So it does keep that almost stock look to Android. It looks clean and a little bit more up to date, comparing it to what I was used to with the MIUI before. And that is a really nice touch. And the more I use this device, the more I actually like how it looks like and performs. And apart from that, the 120 Hz display, even though it might not be the best one out there in terms of how it looks like, it does have a little bit like ghosting effect to it if you start moving stuff quicker, so it leaves trails of text, for instance. But still, the inclusion of 120 Hz on display at this price range is just a amazing thing that, again, I really appreciate. And apart from that, I don't really know what else to say. The device obviously has some down draws. There is no wireless charging. The camera could have been pop out like in the previous one, which I really like. You could have had a under display fingerprint. Instead you got the side mounted one. But the price range is just, it's basically a budget device with mid-range specifications, along with some top specifications like the display. It might not be the best, the best quality of refresh rate, but the inclusion of 120, it just makes it such an enticing offer right here that I'm honestly thinking about switching to this device myself here. The cameras could be better, honestly, and that is something that they can work on, because the sensors are okay. Just the the software behind it is not. It uses too much beautification, or however you want to call it. So that could be a little bit toned down for basically the rest of the world. And what else is there to say? I probably would not mind having a wireless charging, but then at this price range I don't really care that much for it. I have it on my device and I barely use it. It's just kind of a nice thing to have sometimes to slap your device on, or also when you're using wireless earbuds. It is a nice thing to have the reverse charging, because most of the devices that have wireless charging, they also do reverse one, so you can slap your earbuds that will have actually wireless capability to charge it. So you basically flip your phone over, drop your earbuds, and they get to charge. So you won't be getting any of that here. And apart from that, there is also one last thing that I probably forgot to say. The phone has this weird feature, almost all the Xiaomi devices do, or all of them, where you can see it right here, this little black dot. That is an IR sensor, and you can basically set it up as a remote control. So you have a specific application in here. Now I'm just kind of adding this here for fun because it is part of the device. If you find it useful or not, it's completely up to you. You basically can substitute your existing remotes for like TVs, TV boxes and all that stuff, and use your phone to control them. And as you can see, that is basically the app. So you can tap on add remote and you basically choose the category, look for your remote. If you don't see it, you can still also try to use the remote itself, and it will try to mimic it and basically see how it works. Yeah, it's a nice touch here. Like the inclusion of it, but honestly I don't really use things like TV much, so it is semi-useless to me. I basically have nothing of these accessories that I can use it on. I do like the fact that if I would, I could use my phone for it and basically control majority of the things in my house with just a single click on my device instead of looking for the remote control. And see, lastly, we can go over the casing just to see how it looks like. So let's lock it up and drop it in here. I can already see this will be a chunky case. Yep. So obviously it adds a little bit of a bezel all around the device, so you can drop it on the screen and it won't get scratched. So that's really nice. Also, I can see that the camera, because the case is a little bit thinner, it adds a bezel around the casing itself, as you can see right over here, just to cover the sensor itself, so it doesn't protrude as obnoxiously as it does without it. So you can place it. Now it does have still a little wobble because it is circular, but it will protect your camera glass a little bit better than without the casing. And I guess last thing, that is actually weird. They have a little plug for the port, as you can see, so you can kind of plug your Type-C port. That is actually a really nice thing. When you're putting it in a pocket, not sure if you ever encountered this, this minimal kind of clothing fuzz gets in the port sometimes and you can't plug it in, and then you have to take like a needle and start scooping it out of there. This will basically prevent that. That is actually something that I haven't seen and seems really nice. And also something that I just seen right now is the fact that we actually have a headphone jack on here. So if you want to use your headphones, you can actually use them. Just slap them in here and they will work just fine. You don't need any kind of wireless earbuds or cans to use with this. So yeah, as you can see, this is the back. It does kind of advertise itself with the POCO and this really nice effect. I really like it. Now it doesn't have any kind of weird texture to it. It's just plastic on the back and it's smooth, but it has a nice effect to it overall. And in terms of the appearance of this device, I have to say I really like how it looks like. It feels a little bit chunky in hand. It is a bigger device with the 6.6-inch display, so it is not the smallest one. If that's what you're looking for, probably that won't be it. But honestly, it does lay fairly well in hand. It doesn't have like this weird angles. Probably could have been a little bit better. It is also a little bit thick, as you can see. It does kind of rack a over 5,000 milliamp hour battery, so there is a unit in there. And yeah, so finishing this off, and also, like I said, comparing it to the previous version, this one costs 220. It is a mid-range device with basically a almost budget-like price tag. Runs really well. It won't be basically the best device there with this Snapdragon 732G, but honestly, with just performance from like a casual user, just to browse the web, check some YouTube, look at stuff, and just take photos occasionally, and just do the normal stuff that I believe everybody does, it runs smooth enough to basically not notice any kind of performance issues. And honestly, for instance, the upgrade to something like a Snapdragon 865 Plus, you will probably, for a normal user, you only see the difference if you slow down the footage that you have recorded of, for instance, how quick the apps open, because honestly, they do load okay-ish. I don't really mind it, especially if you already have them open and just use them from the background. They will be really quick. Now giving you the perspective between those two, the previous POCO phone, the F2 Pro, which is better, lacks in battery. It's a little bit smaller, and lacks an 120 Hz refresh rate. It just uses a 60 Hz, I believe, but that display is AMOLED, so you will be getting the super deep blacks, basically where the screen is turned off, along with really respectable HDR. Actually, I mean, it's HDR10. Here they're advertised HDR, but this, I wouldn't say it is it. And because it's the better POCO F2, it's an AMOLED display, it will be most certainly better visible in direct sunlight rather than the LCD IPS display right here. But with the better phone and better specifications of it, also comes a better price tag, which the POCO F2 Pro would come around 380, maybe a little bit less nowadays, but I believe when it was released that was somewhere around the price tag. So it is significantly expensive, and that is more the question: do you want a premium device that can, for instance, record 8K footage and, for instance, 4K at 60 frames with a faster chipset, more RAM, and wireless charging and all that stuff? Or do you prefer to have a more reasonable device for a more enticing price tag? Honestly, for me, I would probably go with this one, even though I really like having a lot of power in my device. I wouldn't say it's worth paying basically close to twice as much for the device if all I really want from my devices nowadays is just a really smooth display, 120 or 90, something like that, and just a respectable device that doesn't lag, that can take photos. And this device meets all my expectations. And honestly, if you're looking for the device, I can highly recommend this device. Using it was at the moment a real pleasure, and everything in here might not be the best, but it is enough for me that I don't really care to have anything better. It meets expectations with the price tag that it has, and exceeds those expectations for the price that it comes in. And yeah, like I said, I highly recommend this device. So if you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.